Dean and Tyler Listle are registered investment advisor representatives. Investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, and Secure Retirement Solutions, LLC are not affiliated companies.
It's time for Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. Now, here are your hosts, Dean and Tyler.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Tyler and I will discuss topics that affect your retirement, such as investments, income planning, Social Security, and much more. Good morning, Ty. How are you?
Good morning, Dean. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. Today we're going to talk about retirement savings or investment mistakes you're bound to regret. Of course, these are some of the things that we see very often when Tyler and I are talking to investors or prospects, somebody who's thinking about coming on board with us. We noticed a number of these mistakes, and unfortunately, most people regret them later on in life. So we're going to talk about those, hoping that you don't make some of these same blunders. The first one we're going to talk about is not contributing while you're young. We hear this quite often, and even though there's so much information out there about the importance of investing, and Tyler and I tout the fact that, minimum of 15% should be going into your investments each and every year, whether it's a 401k or a Roth or even some savings. For every one person we seem to talk to, we'll have somebody else who'll bring up an excuse. The one that I've heard most common is, my employer doesn't match my 401k, so if they're not going to match, I'm not going to put anything in it. And they make it sound like they're hurting their employer, but it's ridiculous. It's really they're hurting their own position. So the number one thing that we see when it comes to retirement savings or investment mistakes that you're bound to regret is not contributing while you're young. Tyler, anything else to add to that?
With this one, Dean, this is one of the main ones that we see, not contributing while you're young. And part of the reason here is for many young people, it's easy to blow off retirement early in your career because you're younger, you're thinking about more of the immediate needs, more of the leisure activities and things that you're going to do right now. You're not necessarily thinking about a milestone that's 40 or even 50 years away. So you're probably going to be more inclined to spend your money on different immediate bills. You might have a lot of debt, which is good. We want you to take care of that. But in addition to that, you might be spending your money on leisure activities and things of that nature, figuring that you'll catch up on your investing and retirement savings later on. But if you don't start funding a Roth IRA or your 401k from an early age, then you're going to lose out on a ton of years that could make a huge difference later on. And one thing that I found is how early you start could be even more of a factor than the rate of return that you make on your investments. And we have a little example in here that shows why. So with the example, imagine you start saving $200 a month for retirement at age 22. So that is something that could definitely be doable where if you go to college or you go right into the workforce or you're an entrepreneur. But either way, starting at 22 years old, saving $200 a month, you will probably have to budget a little bit for that, but that is doable. And we're going to go and fast forward then to the time that you're 67. So that'd be 45 years down the road. You'll have roughly $686,000 if you average about an annual rate of return of 7%. Now that's definitely doable with a stock-heavy investment strategy, but simply averaging a 7% rate of return, you'd have $686,000 at 67 years old if you started at 22. But watch what happens if you wait until 27. So instead of 22, you just delay it by only 5 years, and 27 is still very young. But if you start saving $200 a month at 27, then by the time you're 67, making a 7% rate of return, you're looking at about $480,000 is what you're going to have. So that amount goes from $686,000 to $480,000. So over a $200,000 difference is what it took in just those 5 years by not starting until 27 versus starting at 22. And then lastly, if you wait until age 37, so you push it back even further, then you would have $227,000. So it goes down another over $200,000 to $250,000 is what it goes down if you wait until 37. So again, the main takeaway there is the earlier you start, the longer you're going to have more compounding interest over time. So the two things that factor into your 401k or your Roth IRA growing is going to be compound interest and time, with time being the most important. So the number one retirement savings mistake that you might regret would be not contributing while you're young. And the last thing that I want to say on that is, just because you're, who knows, maybe you're in your 30s, 40s, even 50s and haven't started, don't mistake that for me saying it's never too late, because it's true. It's never too late. So even if you're not young, you can still save up a really good nest egg. But the main thing is, the younger you start, the earlier you start, the better off you're going to be over the long term.
Okay. One other item when we talk about not contributing while you're young is, some people will think of it's an all or nothing situation. You need to invest everything you possibly can, or if you have to make some concessions, such as being more aggressive, paying down a mortgage, or if you want to start a college fund for the kids, they will completely quit funding for themselves in their 401k or their investments to do something differently, again, such as a mortgage or for the kids. It shouldn't be an all or nothing. And many people will ask us, Tyler and I, should we be putting money into a college fund for the kids or our own retirement? What comes first? What takes priority? And our answer to that is, it's very hard to help the kids financially if you're not financially sound yourself. So if you're not investing first for yourself, it's going to be very hard for you to turn around and try to be able to fund college accounts for the kids. First should be yourself for your retirement. Get yourself financially sound, take care of your debt, and then you can help the kids substantially more.
Yeah, really, really good points there, Dean. The very last thing when it comes to not contributing while you're young, the younger you are, typically in your career, you're just starting, you're at your lowest earning years, and oftentimes when you're there, we highly recommend contributing to a Roth account. So that's where, when it comes to contributing, we recommend the 401k up to the match, because that's free money. Then go outside into a Roth account, a Roth IRA, try and max that out, and then go back into your 401k and contribute there. But if you can work your way up to 15% of your gross income contributed into retirement accounts when you're younger, you're going to be very well off as you get older and into retirement. You're going to set yourself up for success by doing that early.
Okay, good points, Tyler. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about, retirement savings or investment mistakes you're bound to regret, is going to be investing too conservatively. We've had a rough year when it comes to volatility. However, the market is back to where we were at the beginning of the year. However, we still see people all the time say that as I'm getting older, I need to be more conservative. And we do understand that to a certain degree. Yes, you do want to keep the money that you've earned. Early on in life, you're in the accumulation stage. When you get close to retirement, you start to ratchet that down a little bit to add additional hedges of protection around it. And then when you retire and there's no more money coming in, you're in the distribution phase of your life. You're distributing the money back to yourself in the form of your payroll that you really no longer have. So that's the way it works. However, people too many times let emotion come into play when they're investing. So for instance, we just talked to somebody this week, they're in their 40s, and and they've done very well for themselves, but could have done substantially better. But because they're feeling uncomfortable, they moved their 401k into a target date fund 2020. And when I asked them, what is the reason for that? And they said, well, I want to be more conservative right now because there's a lot of volatility. And I asked them, do they anticipate retiring in the next couple of years? And of course they said no, they're only in their 40s. They still have, 20 some years before retirement. And I just showed them, based on past history, what the market has done during that particular time period. And remember, conservative isn't necessarily a safe, completely safe position. Now, when you're conservative, you do have safer options, but too many people think Again, I'm in safe investments, and I say, why are you calling them safe investments? Well, they're very conservative. Conservative doesn't equal safe. Just understand that. Safe, you're talking more like cash. So you don't want to invest too conservatively. When the market went down, I think on March 23rd, the S&P was down, the Dow was down about 34% year to date at that particular time. When the market was going down, we had a lot of people that we had heard out there, on the news, and you read it online, where people were selling off positions. They wanted to stop the bleeding. I heard that term before. I want to stop the bleeding. So what they did is they sold off positions, and they went extremely conservative when the market was on its downward slide. And then when the market started recovering, they were confused as to why they were not recovering as quickly as the market. Because unfortunately, they locked in a lot of their losses when they sold off their positions on the downslide, went very conservative. And one of some of the traits of a conservative investment is you typically don't go down as deep, but you don't go up as high either as a market. So investing too conservatively is something that you need to look at. I mean, we even question people, in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. They'll have a balanced position, a mutual fund. Why are you carrying any bonds at that particular time of your life? So you look at that, you want to be more aggressive, especially when you're younger. You can weather the storm significantly better than when you're older. You have payroll coming in for a long period of time to dollar cost average. You need to be more aggressive younger in your life. So when you do become older, you can look at things a little bit more conservatively, because basically what you're trying to do is preserve what you've accumulated during that time period.
Yeah, Dean, really, really good point. When we talk about this second retirement savings mistake that you might regret investing too conservatively, with many people, they worry about investing in stocks because the stock market, especially as we're seeing right now, can be quite volatile. But the good thing about funding a retirement plan is that you're looking at a long savings window or time horizon, meaning how long before you plan to access the money. And right now, for many people, 59 and a half is the age that the IRS, that's what the IRS deems retirement age when it comes to withdrawing money from retirement accounts. For some people, it could be age 55, but generally speaking, if you're not looking to take the money out until you're retired, then you have a longer time horizon. So with a longer time horizon often comes the ability to be able to stomach more risk, and therefore being able to invest a little bit more aggressively. And going back to the example that I mentioned earlier with not putting away enough money, we saw that putting away $200 per month or contributing $200 per month over 45 years resulted in just a hair under $700,000 with a strategy where you averaged about 7% rate of return per year. But instead, let's say if you load up on bonds with only a few stock positions, then you might wind up with just a 4% average annual rate of return, and that will leave you with only $290,000 instead of about $700,000. So as you can see, in addition to how long you invest for or how early you start, the rate of return also makes a huge difference. And oftentimes I'll see clients that come in, and if they're not in tune with their investments, if they're not trying to learn and educate themselves on how their funds work within their 401k or their Roth IRAs, they could be missing out on a ton of growth from being allocated too conservatively. So that's why it's important to take a look at your statements. If you have an IRA with a financial advisor, take a look at that IRA, schedule an appointment with your advisor, or within your 401k, take a look at the different funds that you have, and you're going to want to know how those funds have performed and what they're made up of, how bond heavy you are versus how stock heavy you are, because usually it's simply a case of people just not getting in tune with their investments, not knowing what they have. And here there are people who are in their 50s and they were allocated very bond heavily for the last 20 years. And when I went through and showed them within their 401k, they simply said, well, if I would have known that 20 years ago, I would have made a change and I would have been much more stock heavy. And they could have had literally hundreds of thousands of dollars more in their 401k today. So it's a good idea to educate yourself, with what investments you have, because knowing what you have will then determine the different rates of return that you can feel comfortable with. So when it comes to investing in retirement, you definitely don't want to go too conservatively, especially if you have a longer term before retirement. You want to be a bit more aggressive and let the stock market work for you and let your retirement savings accumulate over the long term.
Okay, before we continue, we're going to take a quick break.
You're listening to Dean and Tyler Listle, investment advisors with Secure Retirement Solutions, located on Packerland Drive in Green Bay. For a complimentary review of your current investments, or if you have questions, please call them at 920-347-9888 or go to their website at srsplans.com.
Okay, the next retirement savings mistake that you may regret is taking an early withdrawal. This one hurts. Ouch. Even though during the pandemic, there were certain laws that were passed under the CARES Act that allow you to do withdrawals, and we do understand that. You know, you're talking about a black swan event, a pandemic, something that I have personally never lived through, either as Tyler, so I do understand the unique nature of it. But we also see from a convenience standpoint, we'll have people when they come in and talk to us the first time, we do a fact-finding meeting with them, and we'll ask them about their 401k. They'll say, well, it should have been larger, but I took some money out. Well, what did you take the money out for? Well, we bought an RV, or, we bought some property. And 9 times out of 10, when you talk to people about why they took it out there, it was more convenient than doing paperwork at the bank. And that is not the right reason. So taking an early withdrawal, we really, really, really do not advocate that unless it's one of the last resorts, because people don't understand the time value of money. $15,000, and Tyler's going to take you through an example here, but $15,000 today that you pull out of an account is going to be substantially detrimental to the portfolio just a few years down the line based on average rates of return. So again, from a convenience standpoint, yeah, your 401k is available to take the money from. I've heard people cashing out of IRAs taking a 10% penalty. Really, it should be looked at as one of the last resorts, and it's something that we do not promote at all unless it is one of those last resorts.
Yeah, Dean, this is a really big one here. I've seen this completely destroy people's retirement plans, but taking an early withdrawal. So the money that you have in your retirement plan, it's going to serve as the primary source of income for you later on in life. So the more that you were to take out of that ahead of your retirement years, the more you stand to struggle financially down the line. So you always want to think about that. You don't want to take money out for different things that you need to take care of now if they're not emergencies, because you're only going to rob yourself of your future. So definitely a big one when it comes to taking an early withdrawal. And Dean, as you had mentioned, we've got an example here where if you take $15,000, if you take a $15,000 withdrawal from your 401k, which again, it is tempting. If you do a good job and you put money away, you will start to accumulate a pretty big nest egg. And if you run into a bind, it can be tempting just to go and take a withdrawal out of there. And if you take a $15,000 withdrawal when retirement is 20 years away, so let's say you're 40 years old right now, you want to retire at 60, and you get into a bind where you need $15,000 for whatever it might be, medical expenses, paying down debt on credit cards, a car loan, a mortgage. And if your IRA or your 401k normally gives you about a 7% annual rate of return, you'll actually be losing out on $58,000. So again, not only $15,000, but $58,000 when you factor in that lost investment growth over time. So that just goes to show the lost rate of return. If you take that money out, you're never going to be able to get that back into that account, and it's going to quit growing, and it's going to go towards something else other than your retirement. So definitely something you don't want to do. And not only to mention that if you pull money out of a retirement account early, you're paying taxes plus a 10% IRS penalty or fee in addition to any taxes. So you're looking at oftentimes it's a 30% plus hit just to take money out of a retirement account for an early withdrawal. Now, there might be different reasons why you could be tempted to take money from your retirement plan early, because with an IRA, you can tap into it without penalty to pay for certain types of college or put money toward a first-time home. And right now, during the coronavirus pandemic, you're allowed to take a withdrawal of up to $100,000 without incurring any penalty. So you still have to pay taxes on it, but you don't incur that 10% early withdrawal penalty if you've been impacted financially by the coronavirus. But still, even with those things, even where the government does give you a little bit of relief for taking money out without a penalty, you still don't want to do it unless it's a very last resort. Usually the only reason would be if you're facing a bankruptcy or foreclosure would be the only reason to do that. Otherwise, by all means, you never want to rob from your future if you don't have to. And if you take an early withdrawal from your retirement account, then you're doing exactly that. So this is a big one. Try to avoid taking any type of early withdrawal from your retirement account.
Okay, the last one we're going to talk about when it comes to retirement saving mistakes that you may regret is not having a financial plan. When people hear that, we tell them that we're going to create a financial plan or ask them if they have a financial plan, it sounds very daunting to a lot of people. Understand, you can get a very basic financial plan by going online, Google it, and you'd be surprised. It's just fill in the blanks. At least it gives you some direction. That's what we want. We want people to understand if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, if you were to do a financial plan today, it'll show you where you look to be at the time you want to retire. And by altering that plan a little bit, saying, okay, if I bump up my Roth contribution by another $100 per month, here's what it'll do positively. It also gives you the ability to go in there and model out your Social Security. You can find out, most people don't know when to take Social Security. They rely on financial people to give them that input. However, if you don't put together a financial plan for somebody, I think it's very hard to make a recommendation on when to draw your Social Security. Why? Because each year that you delay or each year that you may take it early is going to affect the rest of your money. Hypothetically, if you were to retire at 60 years old and you don't take Social Security until 62 at a minimum, because that's the earliest age you can take it, what are you going to live off of for those next 2 years? Well, you're going to run your investments down a little bit. Let's say you model taking your Social Security at 70. I hear a lot of the talking heads out there recommend, no matter what, wait till you're 70 years old to take your Social Security benefit. Well, that's silly to make that assumption that it's going to be good for everybody. What happens if you've got an illness that you don't have longevity in your family? You need to take that into consideration. How can you take Social Security at 70 if you retire at 62 and you have very limited funds during that time period? What happens if you have a pension that unfortunately might be defunded over a certain period of time? We're seeing more of that. So don't assume that you should be drawing Social Security at any particular time unless somebody puts together a financial plan, a fiduciary who's looking out for your best interest and is doing things that affect you positively, not necessarily their pocketbook. So have a financial plan done. Tyler and I will do complimentary financial plans for anybody who comes in to see us. Part of the reason is we are a fiduciary. We want to make sure that we know your financial and debt history before we make any type of recommendations. So a basic financial plan is where you should really be starting. Talk to your financial advisor. If your financial advisor does not create a financial plan, then I think you should give us a call because we'd be more than happy to give you one for free. It's complimentary.
Yeah, Dean. With this here, the last retirement savings mistake that you might regret, not having a financial plan. This one's an interesting one because people don't think of it too often. I'd be willing to bet that more people don't have a financial plan than those who do. But one thing that is interesting about it is I was meeting with some clients the other night, and we were going through their financial plan, and they were in their mid-40s. They've done a good job of eliminating debt and trying to save for retirement. But what they noticed is over the last decade or so, they had about $1,000 a month coming in above their expenses, and here they just continue to build up their savings, and they built up their savings to a decent chunk over the last decade. But the money that they put in their savings, it really hasn't been doing anything for them because, as everyone knows, interest rates are so low right now that you make almost nothing on your savings. So they've built up an emergency fund and then some. And part of the reason why they were simply building up their savings was just because they said, well, we didn't know what else to do with it. And here they had a mortgage, and they were putting away about 8% in their retirement. So they had some debt and they had some money going into retirement. But again, we always like to see you work your way up to 15%. And here they said, well, if we had a plan, we could have afforded to contribute more to our retirement account and or pay off our mortgage sooner if we would have known this ahead of time, if we would have had a plan 10 years ago. So what we find is that more people realize later in life that they could have afforded to contribute more or pay off more debt, and they never do because they never had a plan in the first place. So we took them through a financial plan where now we have a purpose for that extra $1,000 that they have coming in each month, where it can go toward increasing their retirement account contributions and or paying down their debt quicker. So that way, by having that plan, it allows them to do those different things. And again, many people, they could be doing so much more, but they don't know because they don't have a plan in place. So the last mistake here is not having a financial plan. That's something that you want to do. And again, the earlier the better, because if you get that in place earlier, you will stick to it and not deviate from it as much, and it will allow you to have a much more comfortable retirement.
Okay, that's all the time we have this week. See you later, and hope you'll join us again next week.
We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. To get more information from Dean and Tyler, contact them on Packerland Drive in Green Bay. Call 920-347-9888 or visit them at srsplans.com. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC. Member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services is not an affiliated company.